Sweet. Awesome. So I am so excited to be joined here today by Jaimee Cooper. She is the soccer nutritionist. I don't know if you've ever seen her on Instagram, Facebook, social media. She does an awesome job of just providing a lot of great actionable and knowledge-based nutrition advice. So I want to say thank you to Jaimee for joining us on the TF Soccer Podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Taylor, for having me. I'm super excited. I hope that this can just help athletes, parents, anyone else that's listening, just to, understand nutrition a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can start off with just kind of telling us a little bit about your background. How did you kind of get into nutrition? What's kind of your mission? What's your kind of your goals with your services?
Yeah, so I obviously grew up playing soccer. I played D1. I tore my ACL my freshman year, and in college, I was actually on track to be a physical therapist, but I realized that just because I like spending time in the training room doesn't mean I really want to be a physical therapist or an athletic trainer. And I've always loved food. Food to me is brings such a smile to my face. It really hurts my heart when people talk so bad about it. And so my dad actually had a heart attack my sophomore year of high school and then my sophomore year of college. And so he actually had an experience with a registered dietitian. And so he's the one who first told me, like, hey, look, you can work with people and you can talk to them about nutrition and really help them be the healthiest self. And I thought about that for a while, and I'm like, I really just want to work in athletics. I want to work with soccer players. And that hasn't necessarily been what is, when I first became a dietitian, that wasn't really around for a career as much as it is now. And so in order for me to work with soccer players, I've had to become an entrepreneur, which wasn't what I ever thought I would be. But it's what I get to do now and what I love. So what my approach and the way that I view food is that it is fuel for our bodies. But it also doesn't have to be as strict or rigid as a lot of people assume that it is. Obviously, there's going to be foods that, are going to be more performance enhancing. But at the end of the day, like, I want to make sure that my athletes understand what health means to them. And that's not just the food that they put in their body or the amount of exercise. There's a mental component to it. And food plays a huge part in making people happy.
Absolutely. Man, so many good things. First, could you explain the difference between like dietitian, registered dietitian, and like nutritionist? Because I think those terms are kind of interchangeable, but I don't know necessarily the difference.
Yes, no, I'm glad you asked. So as a dietitian, I am, so I went through and did my bachelor's. I did an internship, which is kind of like a medical residency, but for dietitians. And then I sat for a board certified test to be able to take. So that makes me, and what a dietitian is legally protected. So if you use a dietitian, you are pretty much legally protected in a way because you are using someone that has done the schooling that they need to do and is practicing by a code of ethics. So we do not do, our goal is to not do any harm to our patients. And so that's a good thing for the client and the patient. A nutritionist, I can call myself that and mean both of them. So you'll see that in my handle, but I also have dietitian there. But not all nutritionists are dietitians. So all dietitians are nutritionists, but not all nutritionists are dietitians, because you can get like a certification over the weekend. You can do a 12-week thing. And while that gives you some really basic nutrition knowledge, it doesn't give you the background information on nutrition that we get as dietitians. So there's a difference and a level of care that you're going to get that's different.
Gotcha. So it's just the level of expertise that really kind of goes into it.
Yeah. And that's not to say that people that have gotten a PhD, there's some really knowledgeable people that are not dietitians. So I think that just using, asking some really good questions, asking dietitians really good questions, making sure that you're getting someone that's a good fit for the needs that you have.
Well, staying on that vein, what would be some good questions to kind of ask the if you're going into it?
Yeah, I think as far as like experience working with whatever, if you have a goal to, increase performance, put on weight loss, that kind of stuff, you want to ask their experience with it. A lot of people, even a lot of dietitians are still learning about this. But I also work in a behavioral hospital, so I'm around eating disorders. And so having to be careful about working with someone who doesn't understand what the effects of, saying certain things to people that are struggling with disordered eating disorders, because it's just such a slippery slope. And so people that have just a nutrition background can actually do more harm than good. So just asking about experience, what kind of nutrition education do they have? Would be some of those questions to ask.
Okay, cool, super cool. So you first started out talking about trying to help educate your clients on nutrition or what health means to them. So what are some of the common myths that players, I'm talking about like youth athletes, kind of go into when they were thinking about it? Because I think about my own playing career. It was almost non-existent, really, what they told you to eat. It was kind of like eat some pasta the night before the game, or you don't want to eat this, or you want to avoid that. Just little things, and you're kind of either getting it from your parents or you're getting it from maybe your coach. But what are some of the myths that you see with working with the athletes that you work with, that going into games and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that what's circulating now is, don't have any added sugars. So like I'm seeing a lot of parents not giving out Gatorade because they're worried about the added sugar. I see them, I hear players telling me that their coaches are telling them to eat salads before games. It's things that athletes, they function differently and need to function differently than the regular person. But there's still a human, so we still have to treat the human being, not just the athlete. And so when it comes to things like, avoiding added sugars, I work with a lot of athletes to include Gatorade because there's a reason why Gatorade is helpful for athletes, like not body armor, Gatorade. Even adding fruit snacks and gummy bears, like that stuff is one of my favorites for my athletes to use because they're fun. Yes, it's an added sugar, but it is perfectly, necessary and needed for their muscles in order to perform on the field. And if it's fun for them to eat, then that's a bigger plus.
Yeah. Absolutely. I know there are going to be some players who love to hear that. So why would you say Gatorade versus body armor? Just trying to educate myself, because I personally grew up drinking Gatorade. As I got older, I switched to body armor just because I felt like there was this less sugar. And again, like I said, I was on the train, less added sugar is better. So why would you say Gatorade versus body armor in that?
Yeah, so Gatorade is formulated to be about 6 to 8% carb solution. So the carbs that are in there are going to be added sugar. Your muscles need that to be able to refuel and to keep you hydrated, but it also has more sodium than body armor. Body armor, if I'm not mistaken, they prioritize potassium. And when it comes to sweating, the largest electrolyte that you're losing in your sweat is going to be sodium. So we want to make sure that there's a ton of, there's not a ton, but there are a handful of electrolytes. So sodium isn't the only one, and potassium is not the only one, but we need to be replacing sodium as a highest priority in terms of those electrolytes. And Body Armor just is formulated kind of opposite. So if I had someone that just loved Body Armor, it would be something that we could work through to make sure that they could still drink it, but that they were, making sure that they were rehydrating in a better way. So no food is ever off limits, if that's clear. Like, just because maybe we prioritize, or, I like my players to have Gatorade, doesn't mean that there can't be other options. But we just need to look at those options on an individual basis and see, well, okay, if Body Armor has more potassium in there and less sodium, what can we eat and what can we drink that'll help replace that sodium that Body Armor doesn't have?
Yeah. So I know you talked about gummy bears, fruit snacks. What would you say to somebody who's like, okay, I love Body Armor. What else can I do to be able to fuel adequately before games?
Yeah, so many things. I mean, we could easily just add some salt to the Body Armor and just do it like that, because salt has sodium and chloride, which is necessary electrolyte. We could have something even salty, so that could be eating some fruit and adding some salt to it. Dare I say, some type of salty cracker, to be able to do it. So we don't want our athletes to not be eating or drinking things that have no added sugar or low sodium, because they're performing often, 6-7 days a week. And depending on where they live and the sweat rates that they have, it really is important that nutrition is a priority, but it's individualized.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess that kind of leads me into my next point here. When you're working with athletes, what do you feel like they usually need the most help with when it comes to the nutrition? So when it comes to they have usually practices. I'll speak for the athletes that I work with. Like, they'll have practices every single day, except for maybe one day a week, and then they have 2 games on the weekend. When you're working with athletes like that, how do you find it best to be able to, because you are saying you're very intentional. I've noticed you're very intentional about how you talk about what food is and what food means to athletes. How do you work with them to be able to make sure that they're hitting all their nutritional needs, but also they're being able to perform at their very best?
Ooh, yeah, I will say that it's not a quick process. There has to be a level of buy-in from the athlete and the parent, because a lot of people kind of make assumptions that okay, like, I would just give them a meal plan, or I'm just going to tell them what to eat and then they're going to do it. That's really not what happens. I really want my athletes to understand that nutrition is one factor, but their performance is dependent on a lot of things. That includes how well they sleep, how they manage their stress. Let's see, their hunger, all these things are, they know about it, but when we work together, it is a slow process for us to really kind of let the light, those light bulbs kind of go off, when they start to notice the correlation with their sleep, their stress, their, their nutrition. A lot of them, like, I don't necessarily have the conversation, okay, you're overtraining, but we do have conversations that say, like, when you are working out that much and you have games, we have to understand that, you sleeping 8 to 10 hours a night is really important. How do we do that? And also taking rest days. You don't realize that taking rest days can actually, it may seem like you're taking steps back when you're actually, taking a lot of steps forward in your career and doing your body really well. So, it's not like, I think it's different for every player to kind of figure out that. And that's, I want all of my athletes to figure out what's best for them.
So it's really, it's a number of factors. It's not just like, okay, here's your food. Cause that's what I assumed.
Yeah.
You're just like, here's your food plan. And like, all right, I'm going to follow this plan. And this is what's going to allow me to perform at my very best. But you're saying it's a process of trying to be able to understand how all these factors work together, how rest, how managing stress, which I think a big thing, because I know a lot of people who will use food eating as a stress reliever, which I understand because food tastes amazing. So food is good. And it's like, now you're trying to figure out how all this stuff works together so that you can be able to perform at your very best in whatever your choosing field is.
Yes, absolutely. I think that it is really important that we do not just make these athletes and parents think that their athletes are just robots. They're human beings. They were a human being before they were ever a soccer player. And when they are done with soccer, because they will at some point, even if they continue to work in soccer, they're going to need to learn and have a good relationship with food, have a good relationship with their body, and not live in these extremes, especially with food. And so I come from, like, my approach tends to use failure as feedback. So I don't ever, if they eat something before training or have a meal that, didn't sit well with them, and maybe they notice that in their performance, that is actually a really good thing for us to learn from and see how we can do better, rather than it being such a negative, like, oh gosh, like, I'm never going to eat that again. Maybe it wasn't even the food. Maybe it was the fact that, they only got 4 hours of sleep because they didn't study for their test, and they went to bed at 2:00 in the morning and woke up at 6 and then needed to go and train. Like, there's so many factors that we need to look at and not always blame food. So I think it's just really important that food is going to be a lot of things to everybody because we have to eat, but it has to be looked at from and have a lot of questions asked, Yeah,
absolutely. I love that point of failure as feedback, right? I think that's something I think about when I'm working with players. I don't want to hand them all the answers, because then it stifles creativity. It stifles, like you said, being a human and in that process of discovery. So I think that's wonderful that you're like, yeah, you ate this. Okay, how did it make you feel? Okay, so what are we going to learn from that?
Yep, exactly. It's fun. It's fun when they're like 12. I've got some really young players that I think allowing them to, like, start that critical thinking is really helpful for them to use that going forward and to learn early on, and not just wait until they're 18, 19 and try to do this, because sometimes it can be a little bit harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So where would you say most of the athletes that you work with, I know you said 12, is that like the youngest age, or do you go, what's the kind of age range that for the players that you work with?
12 is the youngest. If I work with anyone around that age, 12, 13, 14, I really want the parent to be involved a little bit more than when they're in high school, but still even high school's middle school and high school, I like both of those ages.
Yeah.
I have two right now that are two like coaches and one player that's um, working with their national team. So who I work with is kind of a big variety, but what I truly enjoy doing is working with my young athletes and their parents and helping them to learn about nutrition early on from someone that can help them understand how to make it work with their family unit and not just get some like like you said earlier, like getting this information over here and Googling this and like looking at this Instagram post, like that is so unhelpful for a lot of people. And it's hard to apply it and make it sustainable. So yeah, I like working with parents and players.
I'm the exact same way. I feel like it's a whole family type of affair when I'm working with players in my program. I don't ever want to just be like talking to the players.
Yeah.
They're not the ones who necessarily can help encourage. Again, even if I work with this player a couple times a week, they're obviously going back to their family unit. And if they're not reinforcing some of the stuff or encouraging them to do the right thing, or even just knowledgeable,
Yes.
it's really hard to be able to get the changes to help with that discovery process.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because we think that kids need to like learn nutrition from like school. I get a lot of parents that tell me that, and I'm actually glad that they don't, because I really don't want their like third grade teacher teaching them about nutrition. But understanding that parents play such a huge role in someone's relationship with food.
Yeah.
And if a parent has a really bad relationship with food or their body, kids are sponges. And so they see mom picking apart her body, or dad, commenting on mom's body, or, mom and dad both going on diets. And well, what does that do for the athlete? Like it sends a lot of mixed messages to our kids. And so it's not always possible, but I really like to encourage parents to really take a deep dive into their relationship with food, because whether we like it or not, those habits get carried down to, their child.
Absolutely. So how do you go about educating? I know you say you encourage them, but how do you go about educating parents, especially since they are adults and they're like, well, this is for my kid. Why do I need to change what I'm?
Yeah, I think I want to make sure that everybody understands that, I want what's best for the athlete. And, that's usually where we both agree on, parents and myself. We want the best for the athletes. So we're coming from a place of, mutual agreement. There's not a time where I'm like, mom, dad, you really need to take a hard look at, how you view food. But the reason why I like them on the calls is when I introduce nutrition topics and how I introduce them, I want my parents and my athlete to be asking me questions. And so usually those parents, I encourage them to ask questions so that we can truly break down maybe why there might be like a certain food rule or an aversion to a food, or maybe a belief about a food that they heard. And so we kind of get to the bottom of it and see, is there any validity to it? What is, if I can pull up research really quickly, just kind of show them, how it's benefiting them or how it's not benefiting them, whether that's, diet, added sugar, all that stuff. So it also is a long process. And so I don't ever, I think nutrition is just something that we are always going to learn about. Like I've been a dietitian for, 6 years. And I still feel like I know nothing about nutrition, but I know a lot about it, but it just feels like there's always more that we're learning about and we'll always learn about.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you made a good point. Now it lost on me. When it comes to working with parents, or even working with a player, you say it's a long process. So how typically how long do you work with a player? And like is it like a month? I'm sure it's longer than a month, but like, is it like a short time they come in and they kind of review what they're going through, or is it like you're like, hey, this needs to be like, a year process, 6 months process? How do you usually go about educating? Because again, it is a process like anything else.
Yeah. So it depends. Sometimes like right now I have one 12-year-old that is probably going to be done with me after 3 months because, they're doing just such a great job. And, but then I normally work with people between 6 and 9 months. So I could always have someone that would maybe be on like retainer, I guess, and just like kind of have me to ask questions. But I want to make sure that my athlete feels and the parent feels confident that they know what they're doing and can be able to have some flexibility with their food when they're traveling. So understanding and learning that can take 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
I don't like keeping anybody in my program if I feel like they're truly ready, because that doesn't do them any good just to hang on. But it's a weekly coaching program for the first 3 months, and then after that it starts to space out, just because the things that we're working on, they just take some time. Like nutrition isn't just well, I'm going to try it right before this training, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's not how I do things. So I want to make sure that like if we've tried this out for a really good time under different conditions, under the same conditions, great, it worked for you, let's keep it, but let's try something else too, to make sure that you have some flexibility and variety so that you're not bored of gummy bears, because it can happen. Or like, let's introduce some Skittles and make it really fun.
That's super cool. That's awesome, man. I wish I wish my parents could hear this. The amount of times that they would hear. I mean, they were, to be fair, I mean, I think that they were, I wouldn't say that they were super strict, but like just here in the back, like, no, like you need quick energy, and why not make it something that you enjoy eating, right? Yeah. Gummy bears, Skittles, fruit snacks, whatever. Yeah. I think that is such a different way of approaching nutrition than I know I was kind of introduced to it, or even I'm sure a lot of people were.
Yes, I think that I think allowing all foods to fit allows players to be able to really build that relationship with food, to find out what makes them feel good. Because honestly, if they can't do that, then they're going to struggle with learning how to fuel themselves. And often they're going to underfuel themselves because they're really not going to know it's going to affect their performance, especially with as much as as much as I know my athletes are training. I can only imagine majority of them are. So that is having a really healthy relationship and including sugary foods. Not like we're going to ever go overboard on them, but when we make it to where they're not as special anymore, then they're not, they can start to ask themselves, like, am I really in the mood for that food?
Yeah.
Like, do I really want it? If I know it's always going to be there, then do I want that, or do I want, the grapes in the refrigerator because they're cold and they have that crunch that I'm looking for? Like that, there's just questions that I get my athletes to be able to start thinking about and start to ask themselves, because they're questions that they need to be asking themselves every single day, at, all throughout the day until they die.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Man, I think that's a great way to help people to understand that like this is not something that we only eat this time. It's like, no, this is always going to be there. So
Yeah.
let's view it like we would view any other thing that's always going to be there. Like it's it's just food. Let's go ahead and maybe I want grapes, maybe I want some Skittles. You got to you decide or let me decide, right?
Yeah.
That's great. That's awesome. Um, wow. When you said you talked about fueling, right? When or under fueling, and I feel like my athletes will struggle with this too. They'll come to practice and they'll be dragged, and they're just like, "I'm so tired today, coach." And I'll ask them, "Well, what did you eat?" And they're like, "Well, I had a banana for breakfast, and that's it. That's it." And it's 5 o'clock, and we have and we're at training. I said, "You didn't eat anything else?" They're like, "No, I just didn't have time. I forgot the lunch, or I don't like the lunch that they have at school." And I was like, how could you ever think that you're going to perform well if you don't eat? And
Yeah.
so how do you, I guess I'm speaking now as a coach or even for parents, how do you help your kids to be able to fuel correctly or help them to not underfuel or help give them the knowledge that they need to be able to perform at the level that they need to.
It can be difficult depending on the age group and the motivation of the athlete. I think that when I ask before they were my clients, I would ask them like, what do you want? Like, what do you see yourself with soccer? And a lot of them are like, I want to play in college, I want to play pro. Okay, that's awesome. I want you to get there. But this is a very, very important thing that in order to get you there, you need to understand how food plays such a big role in you, showing up every day at training, playing your games, getting scouted, getting your scholarship, playing for your college, your university, and then being seen by pro scouts. Like, that's a process, and nutrition is a process. And so, we start off very, general, like food is energy. It literally is broken down into energy for our bodies to use, for our brain to use. So, I'll talk with them about, what do you feel? How do you feel on the field? Well, I feel like I lose focus. I can't last, very long during the game. I kind of lose energy after the first 10 minutes. Like, yeah, that's because you're not eating. And so we'll kind of look at, the things that they're currently experiencing. And so I don't ever, like the ways that I measure progress with my players is how well they're sleeping. So they tell me kind of on a scale of 1 to 10, if they're sleeping really well, their energy levels throughout the day, not just during their training sessions, but at school, their mood, if their mood's kind of like fluctuating, then that's something that we measure. Performance, obviously, and then, their appetite. So, I kind of help them to kind of connect those dots as we work. So it's a slow process for my younger athletes. The high school kids, they start to learn a lot of that stuff a little bit, they kind of accept it a little bit easier. We just have to learn how to actually have to give them more permission to eat certain things than I think I ever thought I would need to do. People need permission to eat, eat more meals and more snacks and certain foods versus, me restricting them from anything, which I don't do.
Yeah. So it's really giving them permission to be able to say, yeah, you can eat that. Like,
Yep.
eat that, whatever it may be. Like, don't hold back because you don't want them to go to the other end of the spectrum where they're counting calories or they're looking at
Oh,
everything.
I don't want them to count calories. I think tracking macros is really unnecessary. I think if pizza was like their number one food, would I say like eat pizza every single day? It's probably not going to make them feel the best and play the best at the end of the day, but like,
Yeah.
if that is the only food, if they're so picky, then let's add it. And then let's see what else we can add to that meal to make it a little bit more balanced. And then start to explore other options so that they start to feel more confident when trying new foods. So it's everybody's different.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a wonderful thing about food. Everybody has a different perspective on it.
Yeah.
What was I going to ask? So what would you say, I'll put myself on the hot seat. What would you say to me when it comes to educating my players or educating parents about this, the whole nutrition? Because I do want to give them actionable things to be able to take. I put out a podcast maybe a couple of weeks ago just talking about like 2 things. And I made sure I was very clear. I was like, listen, I'm not going to give out specific dietitian advice. I know not to go down that road. But I just told them like, how much fruits and vegetables, look at that. Can you do more of that? And then how much water are you drinking? How much fluids are you getting on a daily basis? So what would you say to me? Is that a good thing? Was that overstepping, or how would you kind of educate me?
I think that was good. I think, there's never like for coaches and parents, like getting into like too specific of details. Yeah, probably not a good thing.
Yeah.
But like hydration, drink half your body weight in fluid. So it doesn't have to be water. I like my athletes to use the like a urine color chart, and they're going to be dehydrated at the beginning of the day. We want to aim for like a light lemonade color. So as they're drinking half their body weight, they can kind of visually see their pee either changing, up or down, depending on how hydrated or dehydrated. I think encouraging carbs. Let's not vilify carbohydrates in any form, because the body does not know the difference between a jelly bean or a grape sugar, like the natural sugars. Like the body needs a ton of carbohydrates, and so that's going to be used for our brains first, then our body to be able to have that energy in our muscles. So if we want our athletes to be doing well in the classroom and we want them to be doing well on the field, we need to make sure that they are eating a lot of carbohydrates consistently throughout the day. So that is not just like, hey, let's load up on jelly beans throughout the entire day. Like, let's look at milk, grains like oatmeal, rice, pasta, quinoa, all types of fruit, beans. Like, we want some good variety in there, obviously. But breads, like, we need them to get a variety of things. And so when it comes to like the specifics, like that can be something that they work on with, a professional, but get them just to get carbs and not think that they're a bad thing, is helpful for me if you're telling them to eat carbs, because they're hearing it from other places. Making sure that they're getting protein. I like to tell them like the palm of their hand. So that at least at every meal.
Yeah.
So, it's not like, it doesn't have to be too difficult, but just being really general with it, encouraging variety and protein, carbs throughout the day. Like you said, vegetables, that can be a tricky thing for a lot of them, but even if they get color on the plate in the form of fruit, that's okay. They're still getting some really good vitamins and nutrients from the color, even if it's fruit. And then, the hydration part, like that can be a whole few months in and of itself to really nail down. But it's one day at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Those are great actionable steps. I know.
Thank you.
I think I think for me, I mean, I was fortunate enough to have parents who did like their whole thing was like pretty much every day you're gonna have a salad. Now, there were days that I was like, I don't really want to eat salad, but I do think it did help me to not be so averse to
Yeah.
the food groups and different things. I know some friends of mine now who are, you know, post playing, post college, and they just have such a difficulty when it comes to um, eating. And I think it was just because that, you know, maybe at an age, maybe they were really picky, or maybe they just didn't understand the need for this. And I want to make sure I get my athletes or the players who I work with, you know, on the right path when it comes to food.
Yeah, definitely. I think thank you for even asking that question because um I think the more that they're hearing consistent messages is helpful. Um and I just remembered one, like encouraging them to eat snacks. Like
Mm,
if you work with middle school and high school kids, like they do not just need 3 meals. They need to be eating honestly up to 3 to 4 snacks a day to help them grow. And they're going to grow and they're going to gain weight because they should gain weight because they're not going to be the 10-year-old that they, used to be. They're about to be, getting into their adult body.
mhm. Yeah.
So, um, it's not an easy thing, but it's not something that I think athletes and parents should assume that they should know. It's okay if they don't, and it's okay to ask for help. And it's no one, I'm not going to judge them, however they come to me. Like I'm just, a vehicle for helping them have a help their athlete and their family be the healthiest version of themselves.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And I think people need to know that you're not going to judge them. Your job isn't to be able to kind of say, "Hey, no, you're doing the wrong thing," and kind of wag your finger at them, right? And talking to you, obviously, I don't think that's going to come across at all. But you know, I think there's so many people who will be like, well, you know, they think of it as a like going to the doctor and the doctor saying, well, look at your blood pressure, your cholesterol, like you need to change this, this, and this. And your whole perspective, if I'm getting it correctly, is well, let's look at the whole thing. What else is going on in your life, and how can we best address that with through nutrition, but also the other areas in their life that may be um, going into this symptom or this problem or whatever it is, or not even a problem, just whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, you're 100%. I appreciate, that because I think that we as dietitians, like I hate our name,
Mm, mhm.
that it gives a stigma that we only deal with weight loss, that we only deal with, we're the food police, like people need to atone for their food sins. Like that's not even remotely what I do and how I serve my clients. Like I want them to be able to eat foods that are culturally, for them that they enjoy eating, and I want to make sure that they, um, you know, find a healthy relationship with all types of foods.
Absolutely. What would your name? What name would you like you instead of dietitian? Instead of dietitian, what would you want to call yourself?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. Like, oh, I don't even know. That's a good question. I need to be thinking about that because just something that doesn't have the word diet in it.
Yeah,
Diet has
absolutely.
such a negative connotation now. Um, and even nutritionist, I think, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just such a like a nasty word.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, whenever you think of diet, you're just like, oh, well, I guess I'm not gonna have any fun anymore.
Yeah, I know. It's like, oh my gosh, like where did I go to? I pretty much went to like a purgatory or something.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, hey, Jamie, that's pretty much all I have. Do you have anything else that you would want to share to um, parents or players who may be listening to this podcast?
I think the last thing I would say is just when it comes to nutrition, like everybody has their opinion, but like find out what works best. So what works best for one family, what works best for another player, like that doesn't really, to me, doesn't go very far. Like you need to find out what works best for you. And if you are a parent and you feel like you have anxiety around food because you don't know how to feed them at tournaments, you don't know, you feel like you're doing them an injustice, like let me know, because it doesn't have to be like that. Food doesn't have to be stressful. And I wish that I knew this when I was playing, because, I knew that I was under fueling and didn't even know it, didn't even put two and two together that food was kind of that missing piece, even though I loved it. But yeah, so food, food is amazing. Food is a lot of things, and it can definitely help impact performance in a positive way, not just like a negative way that people may think. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if they want to contact you, I know you said you have a Facebook group. What's the name of the Facebook group?
Nutrition, I think it's, I think I've just recently changed the name, but it's nutrition coaching for soccer players.
Okay, cool.
And then I have my email list that maybe I'll send that to you.
Yeah, just send that, and then I'll include it down below. Sweet. And then they let's say they heard this and they're like, okay, I definitely want to work with Jaimee. Would they just reach out to you directly? Do you have a website, or what's kind of the best way?
Yeah, so I'd probably have them either email me, which I'll send you my email.
Sweet.
And then you can email me or send me a DM on Instagram, or those are probably the two easiest ways. And then if they want, we can hop on a call, they can complete an application, and then we can just see if we're a good fit before deciding to work together.
Okay, cool. Sweet. Well, thank you so much for your time and jumping on. A lot of good information. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who benefit tremendously from this. So thanks again, Jaimee, so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor, for having me.
Yeah. Stop this.